What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be breaking down how I'm going to be hooking up my Crested Gecko enclosure. It's going to be good for probably their whole entire life, and it's going to be bioactive, and it's only $20. So if that's something you guys are going to want to see, stay tuned. I'm going to be walking you guys through the process. Okay, so this project has been delayed a little bit based off of it's been non-stop rain where I live, so it's nice to finally be getting this done. So the first step in order to be doing this is obviously you have your drill or anything that can make holes. For me, the drill with the bit made a lot more sense. I pre-drilled it, just the top. You can see the holes all in it, and then along the sides. That way it just performs a lot of aeration for these guys. Obviously, there is no exact number of holes that you want to put in there, but if you live in kind of a more warm environment, like down south, like in Texas or something like that, then you may want to put a few more holes in there, because the one thing with gargoyle and crested geckos and all the New Caledonia geckos for the most part is they don't want super high temperatures or anything like that. So you want to provide enough airflow. Up here in New England, we have a very temperate climate, so we don't really have to worry about too much in the summer. I may end up drilling a few more holes if need be. So then the second step to this is obviously you're going to want to do some of your potting soil, which you can also use coconut husk. You can use a lot of other options, but this is kind of what was accessible for me right now. So that's what I use. Just spread it out to make it kind of an even layer on the bottom for them. If you are doing these as like egg laying enclosures or something like that, I'd probably be doing coconut husk just so that it doesn't get as compacted as the soil, because the soil eventually over time, especially with watering and the root systems, it won't be as loose, and your gecko may have kind of a hard time to get down there and actually bury some eggs. So if it was a breeding enclosure, I'd do it a little differently, but for right now, these are still grow out tubs. So in the second step after that, but obviously you got your plants. So here I chose to use just Pothos. It was what was most accessible to me at the local Walmart, because Walmart, they got the low on plants. So this whole bundle only costs $5. So I'm gonna break it apart, and I already rinsed the leaves off. So that's one thing you generally want to do, especially with gecko species, because they drink the water off the leaves. You want to make sure that there's no real anything on the leaves for them to possibly consume, like chemicals, pesticides, anything like that. So it's just a good measure. So I'm just going to throw a piece in the corner. I'll throw another one in the corner too. Pothos, the reason I picked it too is it's a really fast growing plant. So probably the area that I'm going to be putting these gets a decent amount of natural light. So I don't know, let's say 3 months, this whole entire enclosure will be completely planted out with Pothos. Nice thing with it too is it vines, and it's also got a pretty thick leaf, so, or a pretty broad leaf I should say. So it's nice for when you mist them down in order for your gecko to get some water. It provides a lot of surface areas for them to actually be able to drink off of. You can see the general inside so far. It's nothing special, obviously. You guys can do any like arrowhead species, you can do spider plants, you can do dracheas. There's a lot of different species you can do. I'm not really going to be doing a drain layer. Drain layer would then be like rocks on the bottom, so that way the water will seep down there and not mainly in the dirt. But Pothos is a plant that can grow with its roots fully submerged in water or almost completely dry like a normal plant. So in my situation right now, it doesn't make any sense to add gravel on the bottom. It's just an extra cost that's not needed right now. If you do choose to do other species of plants, possibly like ivies or something like that, then you may want a drain layer. That way the roots don't get all rotted. But it all depends what plants you do, so just kind of put your research in, or just follow like what I'm doing and use Pothos. So then the next step, at least in my opinion, would then be adding some of the hard decor. So that would be like your sticks, any hides that you guys choose to use. Here, like I said previously, I'm using sticks just from my backyard, just because I live in a extremely rural area, so it's not going to be much of a problem with anything. Some people are worried about pests and stuff, but any pests you guys generally get, you could easily get just on plants that you're adding to the enclosure. If you really want to be that worried about it, then you can boil them or bake them in order to get a lot of stuff off of them. But like I said, I've done this plenty of times. I've never had an issue. So, but again, it's all dependent on where you guys live. So I'm just pretty much putting the sticks across the enclosure. That way, mainly at night, they'll have somewhere to go, kind of a lot of climbing areas and stuff. Idealistically, I'd like to use some of like the cork flats and stuff, almost make it layered, but like I said previously, the expos are kind of where that stuff is at, especially for a much more reasonable price, especially the quantity that I'd probably be getting. So, and expos don't really look like they're coming anytime soon, so that's why I'm gonna have to kind of improvise. This stick's not really gonna, there we go. That's one thing too, is it's like a cut to size kind of thing. Oh, there we go. But so yeah, the Gecko will most likely use most of these mainly at night, but it'll pretty much be simulating almost like a fallen tree branch or something like that. So I'll show you guys how this is turning out right now. So it's pretty much, the Gecko will have a lot of areas in order to go underneath these branches, and I kind of kept them all as a clustered mess. That way it's kind of like one uniform branch, because if it was just like this one branch going like this way, I mean, I may end up leaving something like that anyways from the go at night, because I have enough of a cluster there in the middle. But you get the general gist, because they don't want just like one little thing like this all over the place. They want to be able to actually hide and feel safe. That's pretty much why, at least for the time being, I'm going to be adding this little piece of PVC. That way it'll be an exact place for the Gecko to hide during the day, along with all underneath these branches and such. But hopefully it'll kind of be in there a majority of the daylight hours, so I'll be able to easily get accessible to them. The next step will be adding some Springtails to the enclosure. Springtails are basically one of the most essential compounds in order to make a bioactive enclosure, because they're pretty much breaking down the waste within the enclosure. So they're breaking down the dead plant material, any mold or bacteria that's growing, any waste produced by the Gecko. So as they produce that, especially as they break down the Gecko waste, it's going to pretty much be broken down into their waste, and then it'll eventually be fertilizer for the plants essentially as you water. So for people that don't know what Springtails look like, they literally are just a little microscopic bug for the most part. They're pretty much just like smaller isopods, which if you guys don't know what isopods are, they're just like the roly-polies you'd find as a kid. So you do know what isopods are low-key. So that's pretty much what those are. So I'm going to go get some water, and then we're going to put some water in these, and then we're going to be able to empty some into the enclosure. So I got the water, and the reason we use water is because you're about to see why. Because they're generally on charcoal, and so when you put the water in, then they all float to the top, like so. And then it makes it much more easier to go. I'm going to keep them all together, that way it's easier for them to find each other through breeding purposes. And then I'm also going to eventually add some isopods as well to each one of these cultures. But that's something, again, I'd probably wait till an expo to go and get, because that's where you get generally a lot of the species and varieties. So that's pretty much the first step. I'm also going to add some mealworms and superworms in here. That way they'll colonize into beetles, and then it's just another bug to have in there. The more bugs you seem to have in a bioactive enclosure, the more stable it runs, in my experience. One thing you guys are going to want to do too is, depending on what plants you guys use, you don't want to water them down. Could have done that before or after, or you could do the substrate as a whole, but that's entirely up to you guys. You can also add on top of the soil like a sheet moss, like so, or you could do one of the mulch beddings. But right now I got to use this for orchids, and I have to use this for my tegu, and I'm trying to limit going to stores. What up, buddy? So just figured I'd let you guys know that. Like I said too, previously, I'm going to be adding some mealworms and superworms to this enclosure based off of them turning into beetles and just breaking down waste possibly even further. So I just sectioned them off bases out of some feeding bins. So we're going to pretty much be throwing those guys in. There they go. And they're going to grow and do their thing in there. And hopefully eat a lot of waste and make many more. One thing I should break down too about these enclosures is heat is generally not a necessity for these types of geckos, because usually if your house is around a 60-degree mark, then it's fine for them ambiently. If you do want to add a little 10-watt heat bulb or something like that, this enclosure may not work for you. But again, it all depends the type that your house is at. UV is something I like to get on these guys. Eventually, when I do have them all done and actually in a racking system, then I'll get strip UVB bulbs. But again, something I would probably get at an expo, and that's something that we can't do right now. So just wanted to touch upon that because I know that is a controversial topic with these guys. So this is one of my high cream Harlequins, I believe. If I'm wrong, put it in the comments. I don't know. Crested Gecko morphs all too great, but she's awesome because she's a high contrast. Like, look at those sides and then look at that cream coloration. So she's gonna be the girl going in there. So let's see what she does. Let's put her on a little branch. And there she is. So she's got a lot of climbing surfaces. She's got a lot of places to drink some water. That'll be the next step. Let's mist it down. Alright, so I hope this video showed you guys a little bit more of an insight on how to keep crested geckos, or at least how I keep them and a lot of other people, especially breeders, tend to keep them. Like I said, there's a couple different opinions on UV, especially if you're breeding females, and definitely give them UV. That way it helps with egg development and such. Also, when it comes to heating, I thought of a different way. You could actually just cut a hole on the top and then put like a mesh, or do like an egg crate that you can get at Home Depot or something like that. Just cut it to fit and then seal it with some silicone, obviously. But that's a way you could heat them as well. So pretty decent enclosures, costs under $20. But then if you do end up doing some of the topsoil, like some of the other substrates to put on top of the soil, and then depends on what bugs you end up choosing to put in there. So I hope this video showed you guys a little bit more of a different method of keeping these guys compared to exoterras. Exoterras are great, you know, especially with the front opening glass panels. Great to get access to the animal and all that such, but at the end of the day, the enclosures do run a pretty penny, and it's not needed for their health or survival. So I hope it showed you guys something. I hope it gave you guys a little bit more of an insight, because again, it's only $20 for these things. So pretty decent for them. Should last their whole life depending on what quart size you end up going with. You could go with bigger or smaller if you have a smaller animal and want it to focus more on getting food to it and such. But all different opinions kind of with them, so that's just showing you how I did it. But again, I'm Brendan. This is B Cooks Exotics. If you guys have a page, please like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you guys got to do to get this page going. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys tune into the next one. Thank you.